this book club, and this morning we are going to relax you, inspire you, lift your mood. Whatever you take out of this that's positive, we're happy. Anything negative you take out of it, we're not responsible. We want to inspire you because we've got a rare moment here to meet a global MD that is running a multinational, a multi-million multinational, who is going to give us an insight into what makes him tick. What are the books that inspire him? What are the books that he's learned stuff from that he builds into his everyday life? And the reason why it's precious is this man is a family man. If he was to choose between his family and his career, family would always come first. And it's so precious that he's giving up a Saturday morning, well, just an hour. We're going to be finished at 11, but he's giving up that Saturday morning for us. So thank you very, very much for that. Although this is a big corporate man, I want you to know, running a small business as I do and being part of a Vistage group, he's the sort of guy that believes in the Davids as much as the Goliaths. He will take on board a question perhaps I ask with the group, and then he'll come back to me a week or so later with an email. And just thought I'd send you this because you said you were struggling with whatever, and I think you'd find this useful. I can't tell you how that makes me feel. And like Maya Angelou says, people forget what you say, they forget what you do, but they never forget how you make them feel. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into meeting one of the most admired leaders. Let's make the most of it. So I'll shut up. Over to you, Paul. Paul, what do you consider a good read?
Well, before I answer that, what an absolutely incredible write-up you've just given me. I'm welling up. Thank you very much. What do I consider a good read? I think anything that engages me, anything that grips me. I've always been one of those kind of people that when I read a book, and it needs to get me straight away. It needs to hold my attention. It needs to deliver something in those first few pages where it resonates, and it makes me want to read more. It's been exactly the same, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, books, they've always got to grip me. So when it comes to business, and you'll hear, I'm sure, as we go through this conversation, that in the business side of things, it's got to be something practical that I can latch onto and think, yeah, how can I use that? How can that be applied into what I'm doing in the everyday? So it's got to just really grab me right from the start.
Okay, so it's got to cut to the chase. And you're always reading a book, are you, that they say to read it as if you were going to teach the subject?
Yes, I suppose so. I used to only ever read one book at a time. So it'd be on the bedside table. That's normally my time for reading. Being so busy, and normally, I'm kind of tearing up and down the motorway. I live in Hove. Karndean's based in Evesham in Worcestershire. So it's a 2.5-hour drive there and back. So I have to kind of choose my time to absorb, books and knowledge and things like that. So I have to look to different areas, which is probably also why we'll talk about, a couple of podcasts and maybe speakers who have written books. And obviously, if I had the time, I'd probably read their book, but I need to fit it in. So it's normally on the bedside table, but now I've actually got a stack of books, and I'll have read bits of each of them, and I'll, depending on the mood that I'm in, I'll pick one up and think, right, I'm going to carry on reading that. And to answer your question, do I read books to be able to teach them? Not yes and no. I think the bits that I latch onto and think I can apply this, I try and understand it as best I can, because I've got to then translate that to whatever I'm doing, the business, and communicate and talk to my team about what that means and how that can come alive for us. Yeah. So you need to fully understand what's being explained in a book to be able to do that. So in answer to your question, the bits that I'm going to take away, yes, absolutely.
Claire's just asked, do you believe in the university of the car? Do you listen to audiobooks and when you're driving all those miles on the motorway? And then can you tell us about the benefits of COVID as well, that you've been working from home, haven't you, for quite a long time?
I have, yeah, for a very long time. So driving up and down in the car, yes, very good opportunity to kind of brain dump, really, and kind of think through thoughts and get clarity on things. By the time I'm home, I've kind of sorted all the day's work out. I do listen to podcasts in particular, audiobooks, particularly storybooks. I've struggled with, only because for some reason, when I'm driving the car, they don't go in, they don't stay in. And I don't know why, but I could listen, all day long to somebody like a Simon Sinek or Guy Raz, as I've mentioned to you before, Ange, who interviews lots of different people, and I can absorb that very, very easily whilst still driving. It's a bizarre thing that that happens, but it is a very useful time driving up and down. But with lockdown, as I say, I've been at home pretty much since March last year, working from home. We had a brief spell where I was popping into the office, but it was short-lived, as I'm sure it was for most people. That has afforded me a lot more time to be able to pick up books. It's probably why I've got the stack that I've got on my bedside table.
Brilliant. So other benefits of COVID, spending more time with your family?
Oh, definitely. Spending more time with Hannah and the kids. I've got 3 kids, 14, 12 and 6. They occupy a lot of my time, and also exercise. I enjoy doing exercise, but with a busy job, busy life, it's always hard to try and fit that in as well. Lockdown's been great for me to be able to do it much more consistently, and eat better, and just be generally more healthy, I think.
Right. And
so it's been good.
It's been good. There's been, on lots of levels, COVID has been good for you. Sorry, we do appreciate.
And I think from a business perspective as well. And again, I think you can take a lot from some of the books that we'll talk about. But I think from a business perspective, it's forced everybody to, from that survival mode to then into some sort of recovery, to actually really look at their businesses a lot more intently than they would before. Actually get their finger on the pulse and make sure that they've got all of the leading indicators, lagging indicators as well, as to what's happening within their business, and to be able to then have a set of scenarios, maybe not necessarily predictions, because I don't think at the moment you can predict anything. It moves so fast. But if you've got a set of scenarios that are plausible, that on which you can then make decisions, that's a good thing for business, for businesses and people who lead businesses. The worst thing in the world would be not to have those scenarios and to be in this position where you can't make any decisions. You're just static and locked. And I think that's when your business is on a slippery slope to death.
Yes. And I think that uncertainty you described, by the way, Paul, should we make the rider that we're focusing on business here this morning, and we do appreciate that our comments can come across as a bit crass to talk about having a good COVID. It's been good and positive in so many ways, but obviously if you've lost a loved one, it's been a dreadful situation. But if we move on now to our aha moments, shall we, and talk about, have you had aha moments? Has a book helped get you there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you mentioned to me about an aha moment, I think if I take you all the way back to when I first kind of I think I've always had a bit of a passion for business anyway. And I've always been intrigued. I've always had a big appetite for learning about, business and hearing about business. So I think that's always been with me. I set up a car washing business when I was about 13 with a mate of mine in the summer holidays because we were bored. And we went to the car park of social services in Mansfield, where I grew up, and offered to wash people's cars. We didn't make a huge amount of money, but it was the idea was there. And at the time, I thought it was going to be a real money spinner. So little things like that. So that spark has always been there. So it's not necessarily an aha, but it's more of a an inbuilt desire to kind of succeed, I suppose, and want to be in business, has always been there. If there was a book, and again, you know, we'll come on to talk about it. There was a book that really, really hit home for me and resonated, and I think it has done for many other people. It'd be the Simon Sinek Start With Why. Only because he has a way, he's got a knack of just putting things across in such a simplistic way that you can relate to, that you can then start to work on. It properly makes you think. So I think if there was a book that created an aha moment, I think it would have been that one. And you mentioned Vistage earlier on, Ange, and the Vistage group that we were in. We went through an exercise of looking at our why and trying to determine what that was. And I then brought that to Karndean, worked with the rest of the team, and it took a while, but we did come up with our why, which is creating simple, beautiful floors that people will love for a lifetime. So it's it's about that emotive kind of loving their floors, and it's also about understanding the role that we play in creating somebody's dream. You know, that they may have saved up for years and years and years for a new floor. Sorry, you badged me as a floor bore. I knew I'd get flooring in there somewhere. You know, they've been saving up for years and years for their dream kitchen or, you know, dream house, and you know, here it is, and we're a part of that, and normally a finishing touch to it. So I think, you know, the Start With Why was an aha moment, not only for me personally, from a, you know, interesting business perspective, but also how I could then apply that in the business I was in Karndean, to say, okay, this is what we're about. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we're creating.
Yeah, lovely. Sorry, distracted by a doorbell going.
That's
yes.
all right.
So Simon Sinek would be down there as the the aha moment. What keeps you awake at night is my next question. Is there a book that sends you to sleep?
It's normally my children that keep me awake at night. And Phoebe didn't disappoint last night, so I was up at 4 o'clock helping her out, and then I couldn't get back to sleep because I was thinking about this. But is there one that sends me to sleep? I never struggle with sleep, as it probably doesn't come as much of a surprise, you know, with 3 kids and a busy job. But you know, I'm lucky if I get 5-10 pages in before I
nod off.
Before I'm so tired that I nod off. But because of what I was saying earlier about, you know, books, I like books that engage me. I tend to want to read on because I'm, you know, if the book's engaged me, there's going to be a nugget of gold, you know, in those next few pages. So I am spurred on to read a bit more. But yeah, I do flake out pretty easily. As anybody that has ever travelled with me knows, if I'm the passenger in a car, I am guaranteed to fall asleep.
Oh, that says something nice about you, especially how you trust their driving.
Yes.
Moving on to, have you seen The Queen's Gambit on
No, it's on
Netflix?
it's on our wish list.
Yes,
as is Bridgerton, which we started the first 2 episodes last night.
Right.
Fantastic.
Right, you'd recommend Bridgerton, right? Okay. The Queen's Gambit, the reason why I mentioned that, because it's about chess and about how I highly recommend it to any business person to watch, because it's all about chess moves and strategy and planning and whatever, in terms of how she visualizes the board. And she, I won't spoil it for you. I'll leave it at that. Going back to you, Paul, are there books that you think, does fiction help you perhaps think about business differently versus fact and other business books?
Yes, I think, I mean, I read all manner of different books, probably more business books than I read anything else, just because it's an interest of mine. You know, I read autobiographies as well, and they're normally quite a good source of inspiration. And I think that's what I look for, you know, in a book. I look for inspiration and success normally. success is definitely in there somewhere within my kind of psyche. So
it could be Barack Obama talking about the American elections as much as it could be a business leader.
I you know, Ben Fogle, and my wife will absolutely laugh her head off at that. You know, she thinks he's my male pinup. Ben Fogle, I love watching the programs that he creates on TV. I've read his books as well, and he is quite inspirational in lots of ways. Because he didn't succeed at school, felt he was a failure in everything, and actually this life-changing moment when he was on that reality TV program Castaway was a real pivotal moment in him then finding his why. He, back to the Simon Sinek thing, he knew what his true north was and what his purpose in life was. And it was about nature and getting out into nature and becoming an adventurer was a natural step in that. And then what that's taught him is the latest book that he's brought out, and how he applies that to life. So I think you can pick up lots and lots of pointers and guides from anywhere you look. Whether that's you're out, when you are allowed out, getting a cup of coffee, going to a restaurant, and observing what they're doing, how they're doing it, how many covers are in a restaurant. I'm terrible like that. I'll count how many tables, how many covers, how many times they're going to turn it over, whether I think it's a viable business, what they might do differently. It's an impossible thing in my head not to do.
Poor Hannah.
So yeah, well, exactly. You can pick up this inspiration from anywhere if you've got the appetite to go and find it and go and absorb it.
Come on then, Paul, let's get into your books.
Okay. So go on.
Where are you going to start? Is there one like when you're a little boy that you think, I wish you'd read this sooner?
Well, the why one I think is fantastic for anybody, whether they've been in business for years or whether they're just starting out, but particularly if you're just starting out, because if you understand your why, actually you can hang so many other things off that. And it also helps, it would help any business, any individual as well. You can apply it to yourself. So the whole concept, for those that haven't read it, of Start With Why, is that Simon Sinek believes that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. They will why you do something resonates with people far more. It's normally a more emotive connection, which is longer lasting. So he uses the example of Apple in his talks and in his book, and he does the golden circle with what in the middle, how as the next concentric circle on the outside, and then why, or it might be the other way around. But anyway, you get the idea. And he talks about, Apple just make computers. That's what they do. How they do it is, beautiful interface and interaction with the consumer and all of that. But why they do it is that they want to challenge the status quo of the world. So there's a reason why there's so many people that are Apple converts, and why when there's a brand new product, they're queuing around the block. They're camping out, outside the Apple store to get the latest model, because they're believers. And they believe in the pioneering spirit that they've got, that says we want to change the status quo, change the world. Steve Jobs, in his autobiography, said he wants to put a dent in the world. Well, my goodness, has he done that? So I think the Start With Why can be applied so many different areas, and it also then leads into your values and beliefs. It forces you into looking into what drives, what was the reason for setting up the company in the first place? What was the founder's kind of vision? What was that passion? So once you've then started to look at that, and normally, he says it's to serve a greater purpose. It isn't to make profit. and that's normally always the way that the place that people go to when they first start thinking about what is their why. It's, well, we're here to sell floors, make profits in Karndean. Well, yeah, we are, but actually it's about much more than that. It's about the passion that Mike, the founder, had in product, and how he was doggedly determined to make it as authentic and real as possible, and as beautiful as it could be, so that when people bought it in their homes, they were delighted with it. And that's the love that we talk about in our why. So once you get it, once you know you're there with it, what that then does, I think, is help to engage people around something that is fairly straightforward and simple to articulate. So, you talk about all your employees, and they're your greatest asset. And I've listened to great Vistage speaker called Marcus Child talk about that, and say, actually, if you invest in your people, they will look after your customers. Your customers will then generate business for your business. So, starting with, okay, what is it about the business, and how can I articulate that to my team, to my employees, so that they're engaged behind a common goal? I think then, is a precursor then to the rest all flowing afterwards. So I think, if there was a book to recommend to anybody, it would be that one.
That would be the one you'd, in the Des Island Discs thing, that you'd say, I'd save that
from
one.
The waves.
That one from the waves. And also, that's the one as a young boy you think, oh, if I'd started off with that. But of course, Sinek was born around the same time as you, I think. So.
Yes, I think he's a little bit older than I am, but yes, similar. So yeah, that'd be the one. That
on to your next one then, please, Paul.
So Good to Great is a really, I was struggling when I was thinking, okay, which one would it be? Which one would it be? Good to Great by Jim Collins. Okay, it was written a few years ago, right? 2001, I think, is when he wrote it. A lot of the study was done in the period up to the kind of late 90s. But there are some fundamental principles in there that I think stand true, today, and will stand the test of time. I'll caveat that in a minute with something else. But Good to Great, what he says is, it's about leadership, and it's about humility in leadership, and how successful companies, and he defines in his book, Good to Great, you've got good companies and you've got great companies. The great companies are the ones that grow faster than the market. So they outperform the market. So they're not necessarily the biggest businesses, although you might think that they should be. They are the ones that have grown the fastest. And his analysis showed that actually at the helm of those great businesses were leaders that exhibited certain attributes that he refers to as level 5 leadership. And obviously there's another 4 levels below that. And I'm sure there are some great businesses in there, some good businesses in there as well. But he said those that get to the greatness are the ones that have this level 5 leader, where they put company before self. They're not egocentric. It is about the culture of the business, and but it goes beyond that as well. So the bit that I said I would caveat is that if you look at the world's biggest businesses today, they aren't run by level 5 leaders. Well, I would argue they aren't run by level 5 leaders. Tesla, Elon Musk, I think everyone could agree, is a pretty egocentric kind of guy.
Iron Man is modelled on him, isn't it? The Iron Man cartoon.
Definitely. Jeff Bezos, I would also challenge, is not a level 5 leader either. And Steve Jobs most certainly was not a level 5 leader. So, these guys have built some of the biggest businesses in the world. But they've got their own attributes, and clearly people want to work there. They want to ride on their coattails and be part of those big businesses and successful businesses. So, but I do still think that actually in leadership, and what comes out in Good to Great from Jim Collins is, a kind of a more pleasant way to be, more pleasant place to work, actually still achieving greatness It's about delivering a culture, but also having the right people around you. You know, he talks about having the right person on the bus, and in the right place on the bus. And again, I think that, you know, stands the test of time. You know, you've got to have, as a leader, as a great leader, you know, you've got to have a fantastic team around you of you know, superb people that can handle, you know, the elements that they're going to be
That's
handling.
exactly the point Claire's just made, that you know, Elon Musk may be that sort of autocratic command and control leader, but he'll have a layer of perhaps level 5 leaders underneath him.
Yes.
And all those other companies you mentioned, they'll have big, hairy, audacious goals, flywheels, the 1,000-mile march, or whatever it's called. There'll be elements. So it's a book worth reading in its own right, isn't it?
Definitely. And you mentioned the big, hairy, audacious goals. It's such a simple model, you know, to look at, and that also harnesses, you know, the why, if you like, which is the passion that exists within a business. It delivers the notion that you've got to focus on the thing that you're going to be best in the world at, as well. And then also have your economic drivers. What are the things within your business that you're going to analyze and measure that are going to tell you whether you're succeeding or not, to that big, hairy, audacious goal that you've got in the middle. So, you know, some really good models in the book. And, you know, it's probably why Vistage use that as their welcome book whenever you join, to say, you know, here you go, you should read this. So, you know, they're close, first and second, I think. They start with.
Oh, there's a bit of a tie going on in your mind, but you had to come off the pot, as it were. So start with why, picked it to the post.
Definitely, yes.
Okay, on to number 3, please, because time slips. I believe we've done half an hour already, Paul.
I know. Number 3, time flies when you're having fun, you see. Number 3, it might be a bit kind of curveball, really, and off the wall, is a book called 4. And it was recommended to me by our global marketing director. And it was a great recommendation because it actually talks about the big 4. So the big 4 companies in the book. It's by Scott Galloway. Hang on, behind me.
Is it F-O-U-R, yeah? Yes.
And it's about Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon as the big 4. And it's it talks about and it, you know, it goes through each one and how they've come to be those big behemoths that they are. It compares between 2006 and 2020 the world's top companies, the world's biggest companies. In 2006, it's people like ExxonMobil, GE Capital, Microsoft, Bank of America, Citigroup, you know, so banking's obviously in there. So big companies. You look at the list then in 2020, and it's totally different. And his point is, actually, in a relatively short space of time, those top companies have totally changed. And he also suggests that you know, there'll then be others that join that group as time moves on, because you know, things ebb and flow. It's a, you know, fantastic book that then also talks about the interplay between all those 4 businesses and how they're all fighting for dominance of the operating system of our lives, and how they own all different aspects, which again, you know, it's not immediately obvious unless you start thinking about it, but they own our news. The news we consume is owned by those big 4. The media that we consume and the way that we consume media now, and certainly kids, is owned by these big 4. They are very dominant in that area. Our knowledge, where we get our knowledge from, you know, if we don't know something, where do we go to? Well, we Google it now. It's a verb. You know, so they're owning that space as well.
And it's got frightening consequences, hasn't it? Because
correct, yeah.
For instance, they believe that suicides are on the up. Apparently they're not. If you listen to BBC Radio 4 more or less, they've run the data, and so far they're not.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting book. As you say, it is a bit scary when you realise that that there is a huge amount of control with just these 4 companies, with relatively little guidance and kind of controls over them, and which is why I think the governments are wrestling to try and get that control back. So 4, I would definitely recommend as a book to read. It's relatively short, actually, as a book, but my model of, is it engaging? Absolutely, definitely. It's very current. They're interesting businesses to read about how they've grown and moved into different spaces, how they've now started to overlap a little bit as they fight for dominance.
Brilliant. So that was the 4 in at number 3. And Anita
Correct.
shared the link. She's got so many of these books, if not at the library, on BorrowBox, which means you can get them on your phone for free of charge, of course. Number 4. What's your number 4? How many books?
Number 4 is a book called Success, and I'll declare some interest here. It was written by my father-in-law, Richard Hall. He's written quite a few books. He's been quite a good mentor for me as well through business. Success, again, relatively short book, but really great to get a bit of a personal action plan together for yourself to succeed in business. It's full of energy. It's quite fun. It talks about how you can be great by thinking simple. And again, that I've definitely taken that with me throughout my business career. I try and be as straightforward and simple as possible when it comes to strategy and communicating that. It's got to be clear and simple. And this book called Success definitely brings that out. And it's easy, bite size. You can, read a chapter in no time, put it down, go back to it another time. It can be, more reference material. It talks about how you can use your time more wisely, how you can avoid, the perils of email fatigue. Lots of really practical examples in the book. So Success.
Wonderful. Number 5.
Number 5 is Black Box Thinking. Actually, I would say a tough read. Matthew Syed, tough read because it goes through lots of examples and it labors on points, probably more than I think it should. But the message within there is absolutely something that you can apply to business. So Black Box Thinking, the premise of it really is comparing the healthcare sector to aviation and how they learn from failure. That's really the essence of the book. It's about learning from failure. And he talks about, in aviation, you have now a black box. It records everything, conversations, actions that go on within aeroplanes. And it has made the aviation industry one of the safest industries that there is because they record it all. They record any failure. They then make amends, make changes and amend that. And it's infinitely better as a result. In healthcare, there isn't that black box recorder. And it's still grappling with the reflection on failure, which obviously in the healthcare sector is life and death, and often in aviation, life and death. It is being open enough and actually having the confidence to mark down those failures and learn from them, because it makes it better going forwards.
Does he touch on, Paul, I've not read this book, does he touch on, in the healthcare sector now, they're getting more into apologising during negligence cases? Because that's often relatively, he does touch on that.
He does, definitely, yeah. So he uses really good examples in there of that and when they've done it. And he talks about how much it costs them as well, because when they do that, it's normally, a big payout.
And the other thing I'd like to make the point about Sully Sullenberger is to signpost people to the black box recording of that flight that he was famous for landing, a Boeing or whatever it was, an airliner on the Hudson. And it builds on your earlier point about the Success book by Richard Hall, about keeping things simple. If you listen to the language that Sully uses as his both engines are taken out by bird strike, he gets in touch with LaGuardia, and he's just very economical with his language in saying enable, enable, enable. And that film, Sully, is absolutely a business film as well, isn't it? Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen it a few times.
Yeah, love it. Sorry, on to book number 6, please, Paul.
So I don't have a book number 6, or
Brilliant.
do I? No, I don't think I do. I have a book
Brilliant.
number 6.
That's perfect timing for questions from the floor. Anita, do we
Okay.
have any questions? Do we have any questions?
Ange, lots of comments in the chat. Not questions for Paul at the moment, but I think everybody's really enjoying the reading list, and everyone's kind of jotting down loads of new titles that they can add to their list. A lot of people have read loads of different titles by Simon Sinek. He's definitely a popular one in here, but yes.
Claire's got a question. Claire, okay. Do you want to unmute?
Thanks, Angela, and thank you, Paul, for all that information. Debate we've had recently, now this may reflect on how old I am, but do you write in the books that you read?
No.
I've always been taught never to do it, and I've been challenging myself, and I now put post-it notes in, and I've even gone to using pencil, and
right.
It's freaking me out because I was always taught not to. But what's your view of that?
So I never have. I know that Ange does, so she might actually be better to answer it. I never have, only because I don't know. I've never just got into that habit of doing that. But I do. I've got a notebook that I always keep to hand. So any thoughts that I have, any books that I read, any businesses that inspire me, podcasts I listen to, whatever it might be, I write in there. And as you can probably see, I highlight them as well, highlight the bits that I'm going to take forward, and work on those into business strategy normally, or ideas that I take forward. So I make notes, but not necessarily in the book that I'm reading. But I think each to their own, really. Whatever works for you to be able to then extract the information, because I think books are fantastic at giving you the hints and tips, and they're a little bit like cookbooks. Cookbooks do not make you a fantastic chef, but they certainly tell you step by step how to put together that particular dish. So I think, business books, yeah, fantastic, great, take as much out of them as possible, but actually learning in real life and applying those, I think gives you the richness as well of it, and the passion. I think that's what you get, Jamie Oliver, he changed cookbooks for me because you got the passion, particularly from watching his programs, and it wasn't just a step-by-step cookbook anymore.
And you could do what everybody else really does, is it's a glug or a splosh in and a mix.
Yes.
Up. I mean, I am challenging myself because I know from a Neuropathways perspective, when we write something down, it creates a much stronger link in the brain. Yes. And associates it far more, a far stronger connection than when we type. And although both things are automatic in us, there is something about that handwriting that creates that. So yeah, it's been an interesting discussion, and I'm kind of stepping out of my comfort zone at the moment, but thank you very much for answering.
That's all right. Yeah, no problem.
As a hobbyist handwriting analyst, it's brainwaves, isn't it? That's what, isn't it interesting that Paul's making notes in a moleskin or whatever, yeah. But he's not typing those notes up. He could be on his phone, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Making those notes, but you're not. You're making, because you're thinking as you're reading a book, how can I apply this to the business and whatever, and you're writing it down. And the same with you, Claire. Whatever works, I totally concur with Paul, whatever works for you. Fleur's got a question, Fleur Carson.
I have. Morning, Paul.
Morning.
What's next on your reading list?
Well, I've got a few books that I haven't read in this stack here. I've definitely not read this, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. So I do need to read
It's
that.
a family show.
I do need to read that.
It is good.
This one here, I have to thank Ange. It's the new Simon Sinek one, The Infinite Game. And as I'm a Simon Sinek fan, she sent it to me. I've listened to 2 interviews with him. Actually, both interviews that I've listened to, I've had to listen to twice because he speaks so quickly and he's got so much stuff. It is like taking it in, like, you know, trying to drink from a fire hydrant. So that is definitely my next book that I'm going to read, The Infinite Game. And in, you know, I know a little bit about the book because of listening to the interviews, but it's another step forward from Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last, which is what he's written. And he talks about, you know, the finite game and the infinite game, and how we always talk in business about winning and competitors, and, you know, and he said that's totally wrong. You know, there is, you know, a finite game, yes, beginning, middle, end, known rules, known opposition. That's not business. You know, at the end of a year, you don't stop. There's not a winner and a loser. You know, what you're trying to do is stay in the game. You're trying to stay at the top. And I think, you know, and that certainly resonates with me, you know, and the way, and you know, because you work at Karndean, the way that I look at Karndean is that it's not the moment that we start resting on our laurels thinking, you know, we're market leader, great, happy days, we're going to be dead. So we've got to think, okay, how can we keep going? What's next? We're just going through our 4-year planning at the moment, long-term strategy, and we're thinking about, okay, what does that look like? What's coming down the road? That is the infinite game. You know, that we are saying, how do we stay top? How do we make sure that we're delivering new things all the time? It is not about a short, finite period of time. So it sounds like a fantastic book. And then he's also now started to hint at, you know, what he's looking into next, which is all about relationships, and how those relationships form, work, evolve, and again into business with employees and culture and things like that. So he's, you know, he's definitely somebody that I can listen to, you know, all day long.
And Paul,
sorry,
yes.
Ian has a question next. He's been messaging me. He's messaged on.
And then can we go to Alexandra and then George and Claire?
So Ian, over to you.
Paul, morning, Paul.
Hello,
As I
Ian.
stand here on my flood-resilient Karndean floor, there's one question that keeps coming into my mind all the time about you. We've discussed this more times than I can remember, but when are you going to finish writing Barratt's Business Bible, your book?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, as you know, from Ian used to be the Vistage chair for the group that I was in. I'm now in one of the members of that group has now set up a Vistage group called Steve Jackson. I think he's on the call as well. So I'm now part of his group. But Ian always used to pull his hair out. That's why he's not got much of it at me, because you know, once my career in corporate world has kind of ended, I would dearly like to help local businesses in Brighton and Hove with, you know, their strategy, with how they move forward, maybe have a business group of my own. So I came up with this idea that all of this learning that I'm kind of experiencing at the moment, all the stuff that I'm reading and the strategy that we're implementing at Karndean, you know, is really great, valuable stuff that I can then impart, you know, and share with other people and other businesses and help them to grow and thrive as well. So I came up with this idea that I would write a business Bible, and I got as far as the categories. I think I wrote one element of it. I have gone back and written a second one, and I've set up a kind of a storage area for all kind of thoughts and bits and pieces. But Ian, it probably hasn't progressed much since you were giving my one-to-ones, exactly. But you'll be pleased to know that it is still on my action tracker list with Steve. So he'll probably be holding my feet to the flames on that.
I'm ready to read it.
If we can go to Alexandra now, please. Alexandra's got a question for you.
Morning, Paul. I was going to ask, if you pass on great books that you read, do you have sort of people in your surrounding or in some part of life where you think, this book will help you, and you kind of pass it on to someone else, or are you a keeper and then you kind of reread them again on a later stage of life that you decide that you need to read something again?
Yeah, morning, Alex. Yes, a bit of both, really. I mean, I keep quite a lot that sit on the shelf, and I do pick them up and I do flick through and go, oh, where was that? You know, I vaguely remember, was it this author? You know, and I'll kind of look for a particular model or something that they've said, because I want to use it either in conversation or a presentation or, you know, as part of strategy. But I have got a few friends, so just it's related really to the question that Ian asked as well about this business Bible, and you know, my kind of next career, if you like, is you know, helping other businesses thrive. To cut my teeth, there's two friends of mine who both run their own business. Well, one runs his own business, another one runs a small manufacturing business. And I've been working with them just, you know, at the weekends and things like that to help them and advise them and give them a bit of, you know, kind of guidance really on certain areas, which, you know, they've been happy to receive. And I have shared books, particularly with the one starting his business, to say you should read this, and other articles that I get, podcasts. You know, I mentioned Guy Raz earlier. He does one called How I Built This. It's fascinating because he interviews people who've built their own businesses. So the two that I'd recommend there would be Blake Mykoski, who set up Tom's. He'd started 4 businesses before he was 30, and none of those were Tom's, the shoes. So I definitely recommend that. And Sarah Blakely, Spanx, fascinating, absolutely, you know, gripping.
Okay, and then excuse me, George has got a question. George, are you there? It's a bit like a seance, isn't it, at this point? Okay, Claire.
Sorry, Ange, I think what George has put in, he's asked this question, didn't he? He's asked if Paul has any business podcast suggestions for someone still starting out in business.
Well, there you go.
Do you want to take that, Paul?
There are those, well, there's those 2 business podcasts that I was just talking about there. I mean, obviously TED Talks are great. They're quite common for people to turn to those and have a look through. But yeah, the Guy Raz one, How I Built This, is fabulous. It's a bit like, so if anybody ever read the, like I did, the business section of most broadsheets, newspapers, they'll have a thing, How I Made It, on the back. And it's always a bit of a story about how somebody's, you know, built their business. It's exactly that. So, you know, I'd recommend that. There's another podcast which is a little bit kind of off to the side, but by a guy called Dr. Chatterjee, and it is spelt exactly how it sounds phonetically. Chatter, as in natter, and J double E. Dr. Chatterjee, and it's Feel Better, Live More as a podcast, and he interviews people. They are quite long, I must tell you. So if you're going on your daily exercise in lockdown for a long walk and you want to listen to a podcast, I'd recommend that. There's one in particular where he interviews a guy called John McAvoy, who has turned his life around from being a hardened criminal with 2 life sentences to now helping kids and people, you know, get on the straight and narrow, and how the same motivation that led him to be a criminal is now being applied in a totally different direction for positivity. So I'd recommend that.
Brilliant. Lovely. And then one from Claire, and then Pretty.
So what's on the top of your biography list? I know you've mentioned some of the biographies. What's your ultimate favourite or inspiring? Was that Ben?
Oh, well, it might be, you know. I mean, I read other biographies as well, you know, that are more kind of easy reading, celebrity style. But I think Ben Fogle definitely from a relatable business element as well. And I'm halfway through his latest one, which I forget the name of. It is Inspire, it's called. So I read one called Up, which is about his Mount Everest climb. And the one that he's got at the moment is called Inspire, and it touches on all of his individual kind of adventures, whether it's rowing across the Atlantic, the South Pole expedition that he did. It talks about his castaway experience. It talks a little bit about Everest as well, and what he's learned and how he applies that to life. So again, you know, that's as I'm halfway through that. That's good. It's a good read.
Thank you.
Lovely. And then Pretty's got. Sorry, is that all right, Claire? Yeah, Pretty, you there?
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself. Hi, Paul. Just
Hi,
quickly, you're right. Do you mentor small businesses, or do you have a group where people can join and you mentor them, or on a personal level kind of thing, or do podcasts? Is that something you'd consider?
I think further down the line, definitely. I don't at the moment. Through this Vistage business group that I'm in, that's more of a kind of an advisory group of other business leaders where we share best practice. We talk about some of the issues and challenges that we're facing, and we help one another. So in essence, that is a bit like a mentoring session, but it's within an organized group called Vistage. So outside of that, I don't really do anything other than for the odd friend locally down here, who I impose myself upon to give them a bit of advice and guidance.
Can we all be friends now?
Exactly. It's more about where I want to be, in a number of years' time. I think it's my second career is where I would be doing more of that, and I would definitely want to do podcasts and help business, do some pro bono work as well as paid work. I really, Ange knows this, I really enjoy listening to and helping other people. It's not, that's where I get a lot of my energy and fulfillment and satisfaction from. So it's definitely an area that I'd look to do more of.
Anita, are we wrapping up now, or are there any more questions?
Yes, I think we can, Ange. It's almost 11 o'clock. Unless anybody's got anything else that they'd like to put in the chat.
There was one other book that I'd forgotten about, that I didn't write down and go through in any great detail, but it's definitely worth a read. It's Steve Peters' The Chimp Paradox. A lot of people will have read it already. I've had the pleasure of listening to him speak as well, and he is fascinating and really engaging. But again, it's it's all about the mind and how you can kind of program the computer. It's the challenge and the difference between the chimp, as he calls it, where it's impulsive and kind of reactive, very quick thinking, keeps you safe in lots of cases. Probably gets you into trouble in others, and then the computer, which is the programmable element of the brain. And again, I think relating that back to learning and business books and leaders, you can program that brain, you can feed it with information so that when it's presented with a situation, it uses the computer rather than the chimp to guide you, which probably makes for better decisions. So again, I'd recommend that as a book, just as a little final hint and tip.
Thank you, Paul.
Excellent.
That was fantastic. And thank you, Ange. You are both amazing. It's been delightful listening to you both. Most of the books that Paul's gone through are available in the library. We've got some available on audio or ebook format as well. If you haven't got BorrowBox, which is our app, download it. It's free. All you need is your library card number. And if you're not based in Worcestershire, I'd encourage you to go into your local library as well, because they may have the autobiographies definitely, and the Simon Sinek books as well. So I'd go in and check if I were you. And thank you very much. And thank you everyone for coming along today. It's been lovely seeing you all.
You're most welcome. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Great.
Take care,
Paul.
everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you so much. And you're a star.
Aye,
Cheers.
thanks ever so much.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all